There was a hunter in the woods who, after a long and fruitless day of hunting, found himself deep in the heart of an immense forest. The towering trees loomed overhead, their gnarled branches clawing at the darkening sky like skeletal fingers. Shadows stretched and deepened, wrapping around him like a suffocating blanket. It wasn't long before he realized he was lost. The oppressive silence of the forest was broken only by the faint rustle of the unseen creatures and the occasional distant snap of a twig, sounds that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. As the hunter trudged onward, each step heavier than the last, he began to feel an inexplicable unease. The air seemed colder here, biting at his exposed skin, and the trees seemed to close in around him, their trunks grotesquely twisted as if writhing in silent agony. After what felt like hours, he stumbled into a small clearing. Relief washed over him as his eyes fell upon a cabin, its weathered structure leaning slightly as though burdened by the weight of its own existence. The sight of it should have been a comfort, but something about the cabin, its slanted roof, its darkened windows, the way it seemed to almost crouch in the clearing, filled him with a nameless dread. Still, night was falling fast, and the hunter knew he had little choice. He approached cautiously, his boots crunching against the frost-laden ground. The door hung ajar, creaking softly as it swayed in the faint breeze. Peering inside, he saw no signs of life. The single room was sparsely furnished, a small bed, a rickety table, and a few scattered possessions that looked as though they hadn't been touched in years. Despite the chill in the air, the hunter felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. He stepped inside, the wooden floor groaning beneath his weight. He decided he would stay the night and explain himself to the owner in the morning, should they return. Exhaustion tugged at his limbs, and he flopped down onto the bed, its frame creaking under him. As he let his eyes wander the dim interior, he froze. The walls were covered in portraits, dozens of them, painted with unsettling precision. Each face was unique, yet they shared a common trait: their eyes. They stared at him with an intensity that made his skin crawl, their gazes brimming with hatred and malice. The longer he looked, the more their expression seemed to shift, their twisted features contorting into silent screams of rage. The hunter's breath quickened. He felt as though the eyes were boring into his very soul, their hatred palpable, suffocating. He turned away, heart pounding, and tried to ignore the prickling sensation of being watched. Pulling the threadbare blanket over himself, he faced the wall and squeezed his eyes shut. But sleep did not come easily. The oppressive silence of the cabin was broken only by the faint creaks of the wood and the soft whisper of the wind outside. Occasionally, he thought he'd heard the faintest sound, a low murmur almost imperceptible, as if the portraits were speaking just beyond the edge of hearing. Eventually, exhaustion overtook him, and he drifted into a fitful sleep. His dreams were plagued by grotesque images, faces twisted in torment, mouths frozen in silent screams, and eyes. Always those eyes, staring, accusing, unrelenting. When the hunter awoke, sunlight streamed through the cracks in the cabin's walls. He blinked, momentarily disoriented. The suffocating dread of the previous night felt like a distant memory, though his heart still raced as he recalled the hateful faces of the portraits. He sat up slowly, turning his gaze to the walls. His breath caught his throat. The walls were bare. There were no portraits, no hateful faces. Instead, sunlight poured through countless windows, their glass panes glinting like shards of ice. The hunter's stomach churned as he realized the truth. The eyes that had watched him all night had not been painted. They were real.